Since the moment that Natsu got bodied by Suzaku, granted base Natsu, but still lost to Suzaku and Elentier, the question has been, how is Natsu going to fight him if they ever meet up again in battle? I mean, at this point, there was still kind of the question if he would be like the opponent of Natsu or Suzaku, but I've always thought that it was going to be way more for Natsu because of the interaction that him and Suzaku had. Really, with Urza, it was pretty much just the swords person thing. But in chapter 100, we actually were revealed to not a new ability for Natsu. Like, Natsu's not using something really new because it's something he's already had. He's just using it in a new way. And essentially what he's doing, and I'll like go more into detail and talk about it because there has seemed to be some misconceptions and misunderstandings around how his dragon scales in this work and how his powers are working, and how, or specifically towards like how this form like would really be. And I'll talk about that during the chat, during the actual point, I think, when we're seeing it. But Natsu, the way that he is pretty much fighting Suzaku at a core level, in terms of like how Natsu and his mind is working, is he's kind of doing the same thing Suzaku's doing. He's doing this kind of still, quick motion fighting style. And he's just waiting for Suzaku to make a move, and then Natsu wants to react and counter. If he can dodge an attack or block it, then he will. But otherwise, he's going to try and go for just general attacks. But what he's doing to block isn't just like putting up, oh yeah, I'm putting up some fire, or I'm just bracing myself. He's changing the spots that, like, right before they're hit into dragonified versions. We see the dragon scales. Now, this is really interesting because, again, it's really smart the way that Natsu is using it, because once you eventually get more dragonified and you become a dragon, obviously you get dragon scales, and you just, like, it's not the same thing as, like, putting on the form. Your body is just dragon-like now. Well, it is dragon now once you get to that full transformation. And pretty much any non-dragon based abilities and, regular weapons are not going to do anything to you. So Natsu, obviously, to a degree, there's like a threshold, that they have their own stats. If you go over that, you probably would be able to defeat them. But with Natsu, he's just doing it in quick succession, quick activation of Dragon Force, which is really smart because Dragon Force is his most powerful ability. He can activate just kind of at will, but it says all in. Once he does that, he's not going to be able to, like, he's going into a point where he's going to burn through the rest of his magic and try and take his opponent down with literally everything he's got. But the thing about that form is that it, uses magic way faster than his other forms do. He's got to put way more effort into like an all energy in attack with his other forms than he does a Dragon Force, because with Dragon Force, pretty much everything is a huge attack, and on top of that, it's already costing a lot of magic to be in this form. In the way that Natsu uses it, Wendy's is way more preserved. But Natsu is doing it, though, really quick, so it's not going to use a lot of magic, but also very defensively, because he's pretty much putting up this layer of dragon scales right then and there to guard, and the dragon scales are going to be able to block both physical and magical damage. And obviously, this is a dragon slaying ability, but there should still be like a degree, since they're clearly equal, like a good degree of like neutralizing effect in there of, dragon scales to magic. But Natsu, the way that Natsu is using this is really good, because he didn't invent a new ability. He's not really doing anything that crazy. He is essentially just manipulating the transformation of how Dragon Force works, and, part of your body becoming dragon-like. He's just choosing to manipulate it into a specific area. And one thing I wanted to bring up in this, one, is that it makes a lot of sense for how he's also able to withstand the force and react to the speed of Suzaku, because while in Dragon Force in that brief moment, he's going to, like, the way that Dragon Force essentially works, just as a easy understanding, is because it affects their dragon body, it affects the core of where all of their powers and stats come from. So when their dragon body is further progressed, it's like an expander upon your entire stat. Like, imagine you have a character stats, but for a Dragon Slayer, there's like a percentage, and there's like, it's just this dragonification, and there's like a percentage that they're at. And whenever a character levels up, and like their stats change and stuff, and like maybe they get some form of a specific boost that maybe like just increases one stat. But if you, like the dragonification process, like if you increase it, it increases all their stats with it. It's bringing everything along, because the core thing about the Dragon Slayers, and Slayers in general, is that their power and everything around, like say like their stats and their durability, strength, speed, senses, everything about them is from that alteration to their like regular genetic structure. Because we know that Dragon Slayers, as well as, well, I guess we can't say God Slayers because we don't know God Slayers, but Dragon Slayers and Devil Slayers have the makeup of their body composition altered from their magics, both temporarily but also permanently. There's like a special, way more with obviously Dragon Slayers, because we don't know, we don't have enough information on Devil Slayers to make the same claims. So again, like God Slayers could have similar things, but we would never know, because like every time we get a God Slayer, they get completely clubbed. But the thing around that I think people aren't understanding is the scales. And they were comparing to Godjil's scales. So the thing you gotta understand is Godjil's iron scales that he used in places like, back in Phantom Lord, he uses them in Sirius Island, but his aren't actually dragon scales. The difference between Godjil and pretty much like, all the other Slayers is he is manipulating a solid mass. So he's able to just straight change, like he can make the dragon scales he wanted to look like anything, I would assume. Obviously, like to a degree, it's not like he's like a super micro manipulator and he makes some like crazy art or anything. But he would be able to, change them in different shapes. And one of the things to think about, like in kind of like backing to this, is think about the boost Godjil got when he used the iron scales. Every single case of dragon slaying or dragon force for other dragon slayers, including like the weaker weaker Lacrima based ones from like Laxus, Sting, Rogue, and Cobra, and which Laxus and Cobra, those were dragon force. They just are the Lacrima based, not as good one. One of the reasons why Sting and Rogue had Dragon Force, because it's easier with Lacrima-based people, but it's just not nearly as powerful as the other versions of Dragon Force. It's just an easier one to obtain. It's really the easiest one to obtain, because, you could become a second-gen Jutsu with a lot of money. But Natsu is, in what I can understand, and I think that the best way to put it is, he's primarily using Fire Dragon King mode in his offensive style, but he's like quick shocking into it with Dragon Force to increase like his stats and stuff, because we know that Fire Dragon King mode doesn't have scales. That's not how the form works. Like, when it comes to his other forms, hybrid mode's its own thing, because the Lacrimas were something new, like to the whole way that dragon slaying magic like works in its structure. So it's kind of like a weird outlier. And Fire Dragon King mode is literally just more and lots more fire. Like it's just a heat and fire thing with Fire Dragon King mode. Not just not getting scales. It's more of like a better version of the White and Shadow Drive that Sting and Rogue had. It's just like a base boost onto your element. It does give a stat boost, but it's not the same as Dragon Force, because all it does, it's boosting your abilities, but it's not enhancing that core aspect of like where the biggest parts of your power actually grow and kind of like stem from. Because one of the things obviously we know about dragon slayers and dragons is like the closer you get to that dragon form, the higher end your abilities just become. Like Irene was a really good example of this, going from human form to Irene form, she was just straight able to go from high enchantress to master enchantress. So there's, there's levels to it, and there's like more there to display. So Natsu using it in a way that was pretty much just for like an armor, like a block that he could use while looking for openings to attack Suzaku, was such a big brain move. And it really just puts him in a position to trying to figure out other ways to really use this. Like, Natsu could pretty much, like, at any point, if he can manipulate his Dragon Force like this, he could pretty much use it as a short boost whenever he wanted. Like, imagine he just very quickly dragonifies his feet and then is able to launch himself with, like, the physical extra, like, boost just from using Dragon Force, but he only does it very momentarily. Natsu would actually be really good at that. Like, I like that idea, though, a lot. I really like the idea of, like, the character, because obviously Natsu eventually is going to have to become a full dragon, but I really like the idea of just being able to kind of just fast cast forms like that, but not in the way you'd really expect. Natsu's not entirely just using it for some form of boost to his stats. He's using it defensively. And I think that was the really cool thing here, because... Hey, is it still going? Oh, it's still going. I had like a weird flicker, then it stopped. But anyway. Natsu right now, I think, is really going big brain on some of his moves. I was like thinking, should I just fix it? It's like, well, no, whatever, it's not a big deal. It was like 2 seconds of my confusion. Outside of that, I really, really look forward to whatever new techniques he's gonna like kind of put up, because we know that he does watch and pick up traits and aspects of like his opponents, and this is a really good case where he's adapting his fighting style to fight Suzaku. So I really like, one thing I really wanted to know about, like, in terms of the labyrinth, is Natsu going to come into, like, is Natsu going to clash with any of the other Dark Dragon Slayer Knights, if briefly, like if he went up against Kirin for a short period of time, like maybe just like after this next part, the labyrinth shifts, Natsu and Kirin get into a small scuffle, and then maybe Laxa steps in. I don't know. Either way, I don't want to go too much into just kind of like weird ideas in the future, because that's not what this is. This is more in the hype of just like Natsu's new setup. And I can't wait to see like what else he develops from this, because if he's just figuring out ways to use it in a defensive manner, I think figuring out other ways, like I said, if he just wanted to use it for a speed or like jumping boost, he could just use like boost his legs. He could also just, do it offensively and do short casts, Dragon Force parts of his arms, but for the strength. So, that's just because one thing I forgot to mention, I want to put in this video, is when this is obviously the fan translation, and I'm glad I remembered at the very end, because this was one of the things I think people need to remember. And we'll just go off the fan translations for now, but we will use compared to the officials. Is that when Natsu's saying that, like when Suzaku's like, oh, he blocked it barehanded, but my sword can cut through dragon scales, and Natsu's like, oh, well, these flames are from the fire, or was it like this fire is from the fire dragon? Actually, let me look it up. Like, it's gonna confuse me. The exact wording on the fan translations is gonna break my mind, just because this is at the very end. It's like these scales are of the fire dragon king, or something that is around those lines, but nothing like too on the dot. Let me look it up. I'm trying to see exactly what he says before I end this video, as just a last minute kind of like piece in there. He does say that like these flames are the scales, which I don't think makes a whole lot of sense in wording of Fire Dragon King. And I think the wording on that is a little weird, because like Natsu's not saying a Fire Dragon King, he's saying the Fire Dragon King, and we know that he speaks in high regard to Ignil, his father. So in this situation, I think what makes the most sense is he's primarily using Fire Dragon King mode, but like I said, he's short casting in Dragon Force, because that would make the most sense out of this statement. Because, like, I know how it's said here, but, like, the wording, I think, would make way more sense if it's, like, the fire on these scales are from the, you know, of the Fire Dragon King. Something kind of more like that. And as I said, it wouldn't make sense for his Fire Dragon King mode to really have scales. And I think it makes more sense that he's just using these abilities at the same time, which would make sense. Because Fire Dragon King mode is something Natsu's, like, again, it's nothing crazy, because, like, it's pretty much just an upgraded version of the Shadow and White drives, but it is a form outside of Dragon Force. It's something that's completely disconnected, and I think that would make sense, because for Natsu to combine the two, I think would really meld well. I think Lightning Flame Dragon mode would be weird, but with Fire Dragon King mode, where one is a pretty much just a big boost to the fire aspect of your Dragon Slaying magic, and one is a giant boost to the dragon aspect. Combine them, and you just have like this mega all-in boost. And the only thing left he has is the Aetherius, and then it'd be really funny if like all these kind of powers start to really meld together, and then you have Lightning Flame Dragon mode. It's just like its own thing. I'm fine with that though. If like he has like some super inversion, I want it to be pure fire. I don't want the lightning to be involved. But anyway, other than that, just because I've been ranting a little bit, but I'm hoping that this video kind of gets people across. I mean, like in a super basic version, like all Natsu is doing is using his Dragon Force to turn his arm, like turn Spot specifically into a dragon scale armored piece of armor, pretty much. He's just trying to block attacks, and then he goes for openings to attack. It's really cool how he does it, because I don't think anybody would have really thought of this, as far as I can think of. I've never heard anybody theorize this idea of him using his form like this. So, like I said, I was just hyped in general, and I can't wait to see what else he does with it, and you know, whatever plans he has for advancing his technique in general. But anyway, other than that, though, comment below, thumbs up the video, befriend the like button, subscribe button, check out my other videos. But other than that, I appreciate everybody subscribing. Thank you all for listening. Bye.